ChatGPT said, title, "The Notebook in the Glove Box, Pull Over, Grandpa." That's the first thing they yelled. No greeting, no courtesy, just that bark, like they were dealing with some drunk causing a ruckus on the highway, not an old man in a dusty blue Dodge D100. You know the type, paint faded like denim washed too many times, engine that growls like an old dog but still runs faithful. That was Franklin Cole's truck. That was his road. And that day, that road saw more than just dust. Franklin didn't argue, didn't even blink. He eased the truck onto the shoulder like he'd done 1,000 times before, hands steady on the wheel, eyes calm like still water. He wasn't afraid. He'd seen worse, much worse. But those two rookie cops, Joe Taylor and Rick Santos, they didn't see him. Not really. License and registration, Joe said, 24 years old, still wet behind the ears. Franklin handed it over, voice low and respectful. Rick slapped the hood. "Man, you should have stopped driving 20 years ago. Look at this rust bucket." They laughed. He didn't. They searched the truck. Found nothing but an old leather notebook. Rick flipped through it like it was garbage. "What's this? Grocery list from the 70s. Franklin looked him straight in the eye. "Those are names. Soldiers. Mine." They laughed harder, called him delusional. Joe whispered, "He probably thinks he's a general or something." Franklin didn't correct them. He didn't need to. Some men don't have to prove who they are. The truth shows up on its own, and it did, in the form of Sam Torres. He ran the diner across the street, ex-Iraq vet. Watched the whole thing from the window, jaw tightening with each word. He picked up his phone and made a call. "There's 2 officers out here mocking Colonel Franklin Cole." Yeah, that Franklin Cole. Things started to shift. People pulled over. Phones came out. Murmurs turned to whispers. Is that really him? Didn't he serve in Vietnam? Why are they treating him like this? But Franklin just stood there, hands behind his back, the way soldiers do when they've seen too much to be rattled by nonsense. He didn't speak up, not yet. Instead, he drifted, back to 1967, to the humid jungles of Vietnam. "Sergeant, how do you stay calm before a mission?" Calm comes from knowing you did everything right. He had trained them, all of them, young men trembling in their boots. Boys who came home as survivors because Franklin taught them how. 143 names in that notebook. Everyone still breathing. Everyone carrying a piece of his legacy. Then came the roar, a black SUV, tires screaming, government plates. Door flung open and out stepped General Robert Smith. Yes, that General Smith. Who the hell stopped Colonel Cole? The crowd went dead silent. Rick dropped the notebook. Joe froze. Smith didn't yell. He marched up to Franklin, snapped into a salute. "Colonel Cole, sir." Franklin gave a little smile. "Bobby, you've grown." Smith turned to the officers. "You just humiliated a war hero, a man who trained me, who saved my life, who built this country's backbone one soldier at a time." He pointed to the notebook now lying in the dust. "Those are not just names. Those are lives he preserved, families he kept whole." And just like that, the tone flipped. What had been ridicule turned into reverence. What had been 2 arrogant rookies became 2 humbled students. But Franklin, he wasn't interested in revenge. "Boys," he said gently, "I don't need your apology. Just promise me, next time you pull someone over, you stop and think. Because you never know what kind of story they're carrying." Smith wanted blood. "This needs to be reported. You were disrespected." Franklin shook his head. "No. What they need is a second chance." And that's how Joe and Rick found themselves, 1 week later, sitting beside Franklin in a local vet's home, listening to stories that hadn't been told in years. Learning about service, about sacrifice, about what it means to carry a badge with humility, not pride. Rick had a son, 3 years old. "Wouldn't you want someone to treat your dad with dignity?" Franklin asked him. Rick nodded. Lesson landed. Weeks passed. The program grew. Joe and Rick built a training guide for local cops. Every Friday, they met with veterans. They didn't just listen, they learned. Franklin watched quietly, notebook back in the drawer, old truck parked in the driveway. The sun kept rising, and so did his hope. Joe showed up one afternoon. "We stopped a man yesterday, elderly, confused, trying to find the hospital. This time, I didn't rush him. I helped. Drove him there myself." Franklin smiled, poured coffee. "That's leadership, son." Joe looked around the modest house, pictures on the walls, memories in frames. Colonel, you afraid of dying? Franklin paused. I'm afraid of dying without making a difference. Joe glanced at the training manual Franklin handed him. Pages filled with wisdom, not theory. He held it close. You already have. Rick presented the new results to Sheriff Anderson. Complaints had dropped 60% in just 3 weeks. We treat people differently now, Rick said. We don't just see suspects, we see stories. Anderson nodded. Then I want this training mandatory. You boys are going to teach the whole department. And they did. Later, back at the diner, the 3 of them sat around a table. Franklin raised his cup. To what? Joe asked. To the power of transformation, Franklin said, and the fact that it's never too late to learn. 6 months later, Franklin was driving that same old Dodge down the same road. Police lights flashed behind him. He pulled over, routine by now. A young officer approached. Sir, are you Colonel Franklin Cole? I am. I didn't pull you over for a violation. Just wanted to check if you were okay. You were driving a bit slow. Franklin nodded. Everything's fine, son. Thank you for asking. I went through the training program, the officer added. It changed how I see this job. Then it did its job, Franklin smiled. Before the officer walked away, he turned back. Can I ask, how do you stay so patient with young officers? Franklin paused. Because you remind me of the soldiers I trained, young, full of fire, trying to do the right thing. And because everyone deserves a chance to grow. The officer saluted. Thank you, sir. Franklin drove on, engine rumbling steady. Back home, he tucked the notebook away. 143 names, and now 2 more. Because true legacy isn't medals or monuments. It's the lives you touch and the wisdom you pass on. Do you think those young officers truly learned their lesson? Or did they just get lucky meeting a man like Franklin Cole? Let me know in the comments, and if this story moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Marcus HOA Series, Part 2. The Rust Beneath the Surface. I thought peace had returned after Brenda Milligan was ousted and the HOA dissolved. For the first time in years, the mailbox didn't feel like a threat. My fence could stand 2 inches taller, and no one banged on my door at 6 a.m. with a clipboard and a fake smile. But peace, I've learned, doesn't return quietly. It arrives dragging chains, rusted, tangled, loud. The call came just after I'd tucked my daughter into bed. Marcus, once our police chief, now the unofficial guardian angel of Lakeside Harmony, spoke in that low, clipped tone I'd come to associate with trouble. You still have those old utility maps from before the HOA redid the sewer lines? I paused. Yeah, buried in a filing cabinet. Why? Because I think we've only peeled off the top layer. Brenda was just the face. The roots go deeper. 15 minutes later, Marcus was standing on my porch, holding a black USB stick and a stack of scanned invoices. His truck still hummed faintly in the driveway. This, he said, holding up a document, is from Green Vision Asset Management. Ever heard of it? I hadn't. Of course not. It's a shell. See this invoice. $42,000 for landscape remediation, but there's no record of any work done. Now look at this one. Storm drain rerouting consulting. Another $58,000. But here's the catch. All the addresses trace back to homes owned by Roderick Langford. That name made me flinch. Langford, the original HOA president, before Brenda. Rumor had it he retired after an ethics complaint mysteriously disappeared. Marcus continued, voice steady. They rerouted our water system to feed the private resort being built outside town. Our little man-made lake. It was their water source. And the HOA fees we paid funded the whole thing. Act I. The paper trail and the ghost, it wasn't just corruption. It was systemic theft disguised as governance. Marcus had traced the shell company through a tax loophole in Nevada. The real estate tied back to a nonprofit called Citizens for Sustainable Communities. The name sounded innocent. Beautiful even. But it was a front. Another mask in a long line of masks. That night, we looped in Melanie, a former county clerk who owed Marcus a favor. She dug through land transfer records and found something strange. A temporary lease permit filed under a now-dissolved LLC. The signature? R. Langford. Approved by a zoning committee 2 weeks before Brenda stepped down. Melanie scowled. There's no way this got through without someone in government rubber stamping it. And it wasn't just Brenda. Act 2. Twist in the chain. We decided to go public. Not to the police, but to the press. Marcus reached out to Celia Grant, an investigative journalist who once took down a corrupt mayor in neighboring Birch County. She needed proof, hard proof, that came from an unlikely source. Rickson, one of the HOA's original board members. He'd stayed quiet through Brenda's reign, always keeping his head down. But when he heard about Langford's name resurfacing, something in him cracked. "I kept this," he told Marcus, handing over a dusty USB drive, "because I knew one day someone would care enough to dig." Inside were years of emails between Langford, Brenda, and someone codenamed Senator K. Promises of favorable zoning, kickbacks disguised as environmental studies, and a plan to sell Lakeside's green spaces to private investors. It was no longer just HOA fraud. It was a political conspiracy. Act 3. Truth in broad daylight. 3 days later, the Midland Gazette published a front-page expose. Lakeside Harmony, a community drained for profit. Langford tried to deny everything, filed a defamation suit, claimed he hadn't been involved in years. But the emails were damning. Celia's article went viral. Suddenly, Lakeside was no longer just a suburb. It was a symbol. News vans parked near the entrance. Former residents came forward with stories of intimidation, fines, threats. One woman said she was forced to sell her home after receiving over $10,000 in citations for dandelion overgrowth. But Marcus didn't gloat. He didn't organize rallies. He didn't post victory threads. Instead, he invited people to his backyard and simply listened. That's who he was. The biggest surprise? Rickson, once Brenda's shadow, stood up at one of those backyard gatherings and read aloud from the emails. When he revealed Senator K's identity, a current state senator from our district, the silence was thick enough to choke on. Marcus broke it with a single sentence. "Power hides in plain sight, but so does the truth. You just have to look long enough." Langford was arrested 2 weeks later on charges of wire fraud and misuse of public funds. But Marcus didn't show up to the arraignment. He was walking the lakeshore with his dog, picking up trash. I asked him why he didn't want to see it. Because this was never about revenge. It was about restoration. Epilogue: the fence and the fire. Months passed. The HOA was gone, but the neighborhood still met every Sunday under the old gazebo. People brought lemonade, folding chairs, and stories. The man who once got fined for painting his shutters too blue now taught kids how to build birdhouses. Marcus turned down a city council offer, turned down 2 more TV interviews. But he did agree to one thing: teaching a civics class at the local high school. When I asked him why, he just said, "Because they need to know what community really means before someone sells it out from under them." Last week, a teenager stood up at the end of class and asked, "Mr. Marcus, what should we do if we see injustice?" He paused. "Don't just tweet about it. Walk toward it. Ask it questions. Make it uncomfortable." That same night, someone left a small note in Marcus's mailbox. No name, just 5 words, handwritten. "Thank you for the fire." So what do you think? Is your neighborhood truly safe, or just comfortably silent? Let's talk in the comments. And if this story made you rethink who's really pulling the strings in your community, hit that like button and share it. Sometimes justice isn't loud, but it never sleeps.